Welcome to Chapter 13. This chapter is on sexual aggression and violence. So, if you have any triggers that might cause you to feel discomfort or emotional distress, please be advised that we will be talking about sensitive issues such as sexual assault, rape, pedophilia, molestation, child sexual abuse, and things of that nature in this lecture. So let's begin with historical perspectives that will discuss attitudes towards women over time. So until the 1970s, most states' rape laws did not prohibit a man from raping his wife. In English common law, a wife was her husband's property, and the husband was legally allowed to demand sex at any time and any way he wanted from his wife. If she was raped, it was considered her fault for not obeying. If a woman was raped by someone other than her husband, it was called a property crime, and the husband was considered the victim. However, now laws prohibit marital rape, and there are criminal penalties for the act. This is also known as spousal rape. However, many states do not treat spousal rape the same as rape. There are shorter jail or prison sentences, and conviction can depend on if physical force was used, if the wife was conscious, if it occurred during divorce. And rape in an intimate relationship is equally as traumatic as rape outside of an intimate relationship. 8 to 14% of women report being victims of marital rape, but these numbers are probably low because many women blame themselves or are in denial or confused about what actually happened. So marital rape often includes violence and often happens in abusive relationships. Let's watch a video clip now on marital rape. Oh, I did just want to say that there are some political connotations and discussions at the beginning of this video. I don't usually choose videos that are political in nature, and overall this one is certainly not. It's not the point of the video, but there is a slight mention of some political viewpoints at the beginning, so hopefully you can look past that and just look at the content of the video otherwise.
The issue of rape has made its way into the Republican political conversation once again, and like so many times before, it's not being handled very well. This time, the conversation started with an article in the Daily Beast about Donald Trump's sexual history with his ex-wife, Ivana. In 1990, during their very public divorce, she described a sexual encounter between the two as rape, but not in a, quote, criminal sense. While defending Trump's characterization in the article, his lawyer, Michael Cohen, said it's not possible to rape a spouse. Cohen later apologized and admitted that he was wrong. But while marital rape is illegal in all 50 states, there's still a cultural belief, especially among conservative Christians, that there's no such thing as rape within the context of a marriage. That kind of attitude is born out of a strict adherence to marital traditions, like a wife submitting to her husband, or pressure to save marriages rather than get a divorce. These beliefs are centuries old, while the criminalization of marital rape is surprisingly new. Marital rape exemptions only started being removed from state laws in 1975, and it was only made illegal across the entire country in 1993. But just because it's against the law doesn't mean it's treated the same as other rapes, both in judicial courts and the court of public opinion. At least 8 states have laws with different definitions of rape for spouses. Most of them include a requirement of force or violence for spouses that doesn't exist for rapes outside of marriage. South Carolina even specifically mentions the use of a weapon and an aggravated threat of physical violence. These are just the legal hurdles spouses have to jump to prove they were raped. Because of our cultural view of marriage, it's also harder to prove a lack of consent with a spouse than it is with a stranger. All of these rules for what is and isn't rape turn a simple question of consent into a jumbled mess of gray areas. So can we please stop adding adjectives in front of rape? It doesn't matter if it's in the context of marriage, committed relationships, dating, friendships, strangers, or any other situation. Without consent from everyone involved, it's rape, and there's no need to classify it any further than that.
So, rape is defined as non consensual sexual penetration of the body using physical force or the threat of bodily harm. A 2009 study found there were 240 rapes per day in the United States of America, and approximately 20% of women will have reported being raped in their lifetime. Most rapes occur with a person that the victim knows, and many researchers believe that rape is less about sexual desire, while it's more about power, control, humiliation, anger, and violence. Rape does include such acts as penetration of the anus, mouth, and/or vagina with an object or a penis. However, it does recognize that men can be victims. Most rapes involve a male rapist and a female victim, but there are cases of male on male rape and female rapist male victim. However, studies show women think about and try to prevent being sexually assaulted way more than men do, and many women say that they would rather be murdered than raped. 3% of men report being raped or having been attempted to be raped, but these numbers are probably low due to underreporting. So usually when men are victims of rape, the person who assaulted them is another man. And male rapists in prison usually do not identify as homosexual, but they are violent criminals that see their victim as a female substitute. It is possible for a victim of rape to get an erection and even ejaculate. Extreme fear or anxiety can lead to this. So women rapists will use blackmail, force, such as tying up, weapons, alcohol and rape drugs, or accomplices to attack their victims. Another term you'll need to know is statutory rape. In general, this is defined by state laws as any sexual penetration by an adult of a minor child, regardless of the minor's consent. The idea being that a minor is not cognitively capable of giving consent. 40% of women that are raped are between 12 and 24 years old, so most victims are fairly young. Okay, so like I said, generally, in most cases, sexual assault victims are female. However, there are cases of male victims. So let's watch a video clip now on male victims of sexual assault.
For a long time, our paradigm of sexual assault has been of a male perpetrator and female victim, and for good reason, because historically, rape has been a tool of female subjugation, and statistically, women are likelier to be raped by a male perpetrator. That paradigm also leaves out some important nuance. As I'm reminded pretty much anytime I talk about on Stuff Mom Never Told You, women consent in sexual assault, someone raises their hand to say, hey, it happens to men too. And you know what? They're right. Fact number 1, male sexual victimization happens more often than you might think. Laura Stempel with UCLA's Health and Human Rights Law Project analyzed 5 federal surveys in the United States, and the high rate of sexual victimization among men in that data directly challenges our assumption that men are only the perpetrators. Fact 2, certain groups of men are at higher risk of sexual assault. Male prisoners are particularly vulnerable to rape as well as coerced sex. When that happens, it's not counted in data of sexual assault among the general population, which not only diminishes the personhood of prisoners, but also would more accurately reflect how often this happens. Fact 3, sometimes women are the perpetrators. According to the CDC's 2010 National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, 93.9% of men who reported being raped also reported male perpetrators. However, when the CDC also asked about men who were made to penetrate, 1 in 21 men reported that yes, that had happened to them, and 79.2% of those perpetrators were female. Similarly, among men who reported being sexually coerced, over 83% of those perpetrators were also female. Remember, friends, consent is a two-way street. Which leads us to fact number 4, that researchers have found men are hesitant to report instances of sexual victimization because they are ashamed, because they're scared they won't be taken seriously, because they're scared that it will threaten their very masculinity and manhood, because, talking about paradigms, our prevailing paradigm of sex and gender is that men are insatiable and they never wouldn't wanted, which when it comes to the realm of consent, we're in very dicey territory at that point. As much as we absolutely need to dismantle the slut shaming and victim blaming and sexual double standard that also leaves women often in a double bind in terms of reporting sexual assault, we also need to make sure that men too have the ability to report and have their victimizations taken seriously. Finally, fact number 5, we probably need new or broader language to talk about sexual assault. It wasn't even until 2012 that the FBI updated its official definition of forcible rape to remove the word female and effectively de-gender it. Statistics will change and experiences will be illuminated when we focus on more, well, penis-specific questions and scenarios. Bonus fact. Addressing the issue of male sexual victimization, and yes, the existence of female perpetrators, does not in any way, not one iota, diminish the need for our continued conversation and focus and resources for female victims of sexual assault and conversations about male perpetrators and ending that whole cycle as well. Our resources and our compassion in general should be neither finite nor gender segregated. No one deserves to be assaulted. No one deserves to be coerced. No one deserves harassment or unwanted sexual contact. But everyone should have access to resources and a pathway to healing. Full stop.
All right, so now we're going to talk about rape myths. The problem with rape myths is that they place the blame on the victim and they absolve the perpetrators of responsibility. So these myths support an acceptance of rape that leads to more victims. So the first myth that we're going to discuss is the myth that women encourage rape by their dress and their actions. But the truth is, no woman wants to be raped. They may dress to attract consensual sex, but no woman is consciously dressing to attract rape. Another myth is that men who rape simply lose control over their sexual urges. But the truth is that many men who rape are in relationships and are not sexually deprived at all. And we wouldn't say that it was okay to murder because a murderer can't control their violent urges. Another myth is that men who rape are mentally ill. The truth is that most rapists do not have a mental illness, so crazy behavior could not be used as a sign to look out for. Women secretly want to be raped is the next myth. And the truth is that a rape fantasy is very different than an actual rape, where in the fantasy, the woman is in control and allowing the man to have sex with her. In real rape, there is violence, there is suffering, there is pain, and there's a lack of control. So these are two very different things. The next myth is that any woman can resist if she really wanted to. But the truth is that men are physically stronger, and they also use weapons or drugs and alcohol during rape to incapacitate a woman. The next myth is that women falsely accuse men of rape. The truth is that false reports do happen, but they are rare and happen no more than false reports of any other crime. In fact, rape is usually underreported because victims feel so much shame and guilt and would rather not discuss the incident. The next myth is that most rapes are committed by strangers. But the truth is, approximately 80% of rapes are done by someone the person knows. The next myth is that all men are capable of rape. But the truth is that most men would never engage in rape. Rapists have multiple victims. One study found that 6% of university males admitted to rape, and 63% of them said they had 6 victims or more. So generally, a rapist is a person who offends multiple times. The next one is that some women become aroused and have an orgasm during rape, so they must enjoy it. But the truth is that sexual arousal can often be a physiological reflex that people can't control. But this does not indicate that a person enjoyed it emotionally or psychologically, or that they didn't also undergo some severe physical strain and suffering and pain. So let's watch a video now on rape myths.
Consent matters. Myth busting.
There's some pretty toxic myths out there around sexual violence and assault. Time and time again, these myths prevent survivors from coming forward and getting the help they need. So Charope and I are here to dispel the top 3 most common myths about sexual assault. Myth number 1. Most sexual assaults are committed by strangers.
Nope, not true, Joseph. In fact, about 3/4 of assaults are committed by either friends, acquaintances, or by a previous spouse or partner. Essentially, we are much more likely to be assaulted by someone we know than by a stranger jumping out of the bushes.
Myth number 2. If you're drinking or wearing provocative clothing, you must be asking for it.
Wrong again. Survivors are never responsible for the attacks committed against them. Not ever. Drinking alcohol or getting high does not equal consent. In fact, it is a crime to engage in sexual activity with someone who is incapacitated by alcohol or drugs. The same rules apply for clothing, folks. It does not matter what you wear. Your body is yours, and clear, enthusiastic consent is mandatory.
Myth number 3. People often lie about being sexually assaulted.
False. This is one of the most damaging ideas about sexual assault. Pop culture often creates a misconception that survivors report for some type of personal advantage, such as fame or revenge. This is simply not true. In fact, many survivors do not come forward because they're afraid of not being believed.
Join the conversation, help change the culture, and find out about the supports available at SFU for survivors of sexual violence.
So we're going to talk now about the alcohol-rape connection. It's important to note that alcohol does not cause rape. Rapists cause rape. Alcohol use by the perpetrator or victim is involved in the majority of college rapes. And so one of the things that is used in conjunction with alcohol are date rape drugs. And date rape drugs are powerful sedatives that render a rapist's potential victim unconscious or otherwise unable to resist. These are also sometimes referred to as club drugs. So incapacitated rape is a rape that occurs when the victim has been rendered unable to take defensive action, which is usually accomplished through the use of alcohol and or date rape drugs. So these drugs typically dissolve quickly, are tasteless and odorless, and create an amnesia in the victim. So some date rape drugs include roofies, which are Rohypnol pills that suppress wakefulness and pain in the brain. They're illegal in the United States, and they come in the form of white pills or clear liquid. However, in an effort to make them more detectable, manufacturers are now having Rohypnol pills contain a blue dye so that they can be seen, and they have made them to dissolve slower. The next date rape drug we're going to discuss is what's called GHB, or liquid ecstasy, and it is a colorless liquid that tastes salty, or it can be a white pill. It takes about 10 minutes to 1 hour before the victim will feel its effects, and it causes sleepiness, memory loss, headaches, and loss of reflexes. The next date rape drug we're going to discuss is Special K, or ketamine, and this is used as a surgical anesthesia. It creates an out-of-body experience, numbness, dreaminess, memory loss, and hallucinations. So these drugs can cause permanent damage, brain impairment, difficulties in balance and movement, and alterations in the senses. So rape is one of the most underreported crimes in the United States, and estimates are that between 60 to 90% of rapes are not reported. In 1996, a study found 140 women at Skidmore College in New York that had been raped, and none of them had reported it. Some of the reasons that women state that they did not report their rape is because they think that they may have led the attacker on, or that it wasn't really rape and things just got out of hand, or sometimes they will blame themselves if they were drinking alcohol. Women often think their attacker will deny it and that people won't believe them. They don't want people to know or be involved in a long court process where they're forced to relive the memory of this traumatic event over and over again. However, it is important for rape victims to report because most rapists have more than one victim. So if they can be stopped before they can get to other victims, then hopefully that will be motivation enough for women to come forward and report, although it is a very difficult thing for victims of sexual assault to do. So let's watch a video now on date rape drugs.
I have a question from a mom in the audience, Gloria, and I heard what you were going to ask, and this is really important for women to listen to.
Thank you, doctor. You know, I really worried about my daughter that she might get date raped. I heard there's a new drug, a roofie, where they knock them out and then they rape them. So is there something that she could take afterwards if she notices some symptoms? Can you tell us what those are?
When people typically talk about quote-unquote date rape drugs, the reason that it's so difficult is clear liquid, clear powder, odorless, tasteless. GHB is one, Rohypnol, which is Rohypnol also known as roofies. What can happen is if you leave your drink unattended, or let's say you happen to be hanging out with people that you don't know, you stir that around, it's in your drink, odorless, tasteless. The symptoms you got to worry about: if you feel overly relaxed, a little nauseated, you have loss of muscle control, certainly if you have difficulty breathing. But here's the big thing with these date rape drugs: amnesia. You have what's called antegrade amnesia. You forget you don't know anything that happens once you drink this drink until you wake up. And anything that may or may not have happened, you don't even know. This is where it's so crucial, because you have a daughter who...
I'm sitting here, we're talking about it, and I'm getting sick to my stomach thinking about it. This happened to my own daughter, Shannon. She went with a group to, there she is. She's on spring break in Puerto Rico. She was supposed to call in, but I guess she's on spring break and just couldn't do it. But anyway, she went with a group to Las Vegas, and obviously she met a group of people. She turned her back. Her drink was unattended. Somebody put a roofie in her drink, and thank God she was with a medical student that knew what to do. She started vomiting. She passed out. They cleared her airway, called 911. She had to go to the emergency room in Las Vegas, and she has a complete amnesia of what happened during that event. But the point you make is that anything could have happened and she wouldn't remember it.
But the fact that she was with a friend is the absolute
So the take-homes there are: don't leave your drink unattended, don't accept drinks from people you don't know, don't drink from something that's already been opened up.
And don't go away alone. Don't let anybody take you off alone. Stay with your friends.
So you learned something, right? Yeah. And Lori, thanks for asking that question that a lot of mothers want to ask. It's a great question.
Okay, so for lecture activity 1, I would like for you to tell me 3 ways that you think women can reduce the likelihood of them becoming victims of a date rape drug. So you may have heard the term rape culture before, and there is this idea that there is a sexual coercion culture in some fraternities and athletic groups. And we have seen cases lately in the news and examples of this becoming maybe more and more frequent than ever before. So some fraternities and athletic groups have been known to tolerate or even encourage rape. And researchers have found a culture of rape where perpetrators are rewarded with membership or acceptance into these fraternities or athletic groups. The use of alcohol as a date rape tool is often observed in fraternity party settings. So can we predict who will rape? Not necessarily, but maybe. Profiling has not been an effective way to identify a rapist. However, the following characteristics can act as red flags. It's important to know that some men have these traits but would never actually assault anyone. So some of the characteristics that may act as a red flag for a person who might be a sexual offender is a need to dominate and control. They may be emotionally abusive, discount female opinions, insult or belittle women, excessively and irrationally are jealous in relationships, engage in any form of physical violence, belief in very traditional male and female roles, very short anger fuse, intimidates women by crowding or blocking them, touches women in an intimate way without their consent, fascinated with various weapons, abuses alcohol or drugs, bullies others, or is cruel to animals or children. So let's watch a video now on this rape culture that is being seen in some fraternities or athletic groups.
Sexual assault as a problem on college campuses, I would say, is a huge problem. It's almost a plague of sorts.
Sexual assault in colleges, according to these statistics, it's 1 in 5. So I do think it's a definite issue.
Only in an environment where you have only guys living in a house dedicated to partying and having a good time does it become about numbers and about sleeping with lots of women.
I don't go out anymore, like pretty much at all.
Girls dressing up in extremely provocative outfits and drinking ridiculous amounts of alcohol and going to any party on campus. They're setting themselves up for a hookup of sorts.
So we've spent a month living right here on the edges of the University of Colorado Boulder. On this street alone, there are hundreds of students living in student accommodation. Student life here is pretty idyllic. You have the mountains over there, you have beautiful scenery all around us. But the actual university itself is undergoing investigation for the way it handles sexual assault. I want to find out more about a culture on campus where sexual assault happens so frequently.
So we went into his room and we were kissing, and then he was trying to do more than kiss, and I repeatedly said no.
I was approached by a former sorority girl who was raped at a party on campus. She didn't want to tell me her name, but she did want to tell me her story.
He kept trying, and then we were kissing some more, and then he just at this point I was in my underpants, and he just did it.
The school is on notice of either sexual harassment, sexual violence, or anywhere in between, is that they have an obligation to independently investigate those allegations.
So this is obviously, it's not like a nice thing to talk about. First question I want to ask is, do you guys think it is a problem?
I think it's a commonly unreported problem for as much as it occurs.
Before you go on a night out, when you're getting ready to go on a night out, is this something that passes through your mind? That, potentially something could happen?
With the rates that women are assaulted, I think it should pass through every woman's mind. It's just so common of an occurrence.
We are doing everything and aggressively as possible to really deal with the situation. Our chancellor has been very specific that this is a priority, and that's why I report directly to the chancellor, because that's how important this issue is we want to do everything we can to keep people safe.
There's no clear profile of what a sexual predator on campus looks like. But studies have shown that fraternity members are 3 times more likely than any other male to commit rape. And that's put fraternities and sororities and their alcohol-fueled house parties in the spotlight.
The only place I can imagine that culture existing on this campus in this town is in a frat.
I think the frat mentality of being with a girl every weekend makes guys take advantage of girls.
I don't go to frat parties often. I've been invited in the 3 or 4 years I've been at CU. I've been invited maybe 4 or 5. Each time I've had to prevent at least a handful of inappropriate hookups.
It sucks to see your friends go into a fraternity being really great guys that are really respectful of girls and don't hook up with girls every weekend. They're kind and they care about the community, and then you see them turn into a frat guy. Maybe it doesn't start with one person. Maybe they're all great guys and they go into it, but the way they live for 3 years in a fraternity house changes them when they're surrounded by 50 other guys all the time.
Almost 400,000 college men belong to fraternities across the US. Millions more are alumni. Members say the organizations provide a chance for brotherhood, philanthropy, and leadership. They feel that they're too easily blamed when it comes to problems that plague the entire college community, like binge drinking or sexual assault. That, at least, is what they say off the record. Getting anyone from a fraternity to talk to me has proved difficult. Eventually, though, I managed to get through to Mark Stein, the man who's in charge of PR for all of the fraternities on campus.
Hi, sorry to bother you again. I'm just wondering if you came to any sort of conclusion about speaking to us?
We would choose not to be part of this conversation at this time.
Fraternities are a little bit scapegoated in that way, that the values of the fraternity are misinterpreted very frequently, and cases of sexual assault in the past have been pinned on fraternities.
This is Edmund. He's from a fraternity. And despite the decision from the fraternity officials not to speak, he did want to talk. He approached me during an interview on campus, offering to give me a different view of the fraternities.
I could give you some insight to the other side of the story. For sure. Thanks. Thank you very much.
I wonder what it means by that.
Both sororities and fraternities, like I said, these parties are targeted at the sororities hanging out with the fraternities, and both institutions are founded on Christian values.
The guys in your frat, do they understand what sexual assault is?
You need an absolute affirmative. You need, technically, judging by the law, I learned this last night, you legally would actually need an affirmative from the girl to unbutton every single individual button of her shirt. I think that girls dressing up in extremely provocative outfits and drinking ridiculous amounts of alcohol and going to any party on campus, they're setting themselves up for a hookup of sorts. And they're starting the situation off poorly, very poorly.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
To get in the way before it happens.
To get a friend home safe.
And to not blame the victim.
Critics would say that talking about what women wear is blaming the victim. The White House has just released this It's On Us campaign, designed to encourage friends to intervene to stop abusive behavior.
Sexual assault. Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
In response, some fraternities at other colleges are speaking out, pledging to work with their university to educate students. But here in Boulder, where the fraternities are off campus and not under the control of the college, so far, the fraternities are staying silent.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about what a person should do if they are raped. And what they should do is report the rape, preserve the evidence, obtain medical care, and seek emotional support. There is something called rape trauma syndrome that many victims of rape experience, and it's a two-stage set of symptoms that follow the trauma of being raped, consisting of physical, emotional, and behavioral stress reactions. It's not a clinical diagnosis, but it's a guideline of common symptoms that mirror PTSD. And PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is a pervasive psychological and emotional reaction to a traumatic event experienced or witnessed, including symptoms of anxiety, flashbacks, hypervigilance, irritability, nightmares, and depression. So the symptoms of rape can be divided into 4 categories, or phases. And the first phase is the anticipatory phase, which is the horrible realization that a rape may happen. This is accompanied by intense fear, anxiety, and anger. The next phase is the impact phase. This is when the victim actually experiences the terror of the event, and it's accompanied by intense fear, anxiety, and anger also. The next phase is the recoil phase, and so this is when the victim is surviving the trauma days or weeks after it occurs. And this can include shock and numbness, sleep disturbances, appetite and digestion problems, as well as pain. And the last phase is the reconstitution phase. This is when the stress of rape is processed, told to others, and mental health care may be sought. This is often accompanied by feelings of shame, guilt, fear, and humiliation. Victims of rape may move, get weapons, get a dog, install alarms. They might have nightmares of the event that go away through talking about the incident, so it's important that victims seek therapy. They may develop phobias, fear of crowds, fear of being alone, or fear of new relationships. So in terms of preventing rape, women can take certain precautions to protect themselves and or decrease the likelihood of rape, but that doesn't guarantee it won't happen. It is never the victim's fault regardless of if she takes precautions or not. And men can take active roles in preventing rape as well. So what men can do is get to know your date as a person. Avoid making comments that treat women like sex objects. Do not try to get women drunk for sexual manipulation. If your date is drunk, do not have sex with her. Remember that no means no. And do not assume that she wants the same amount of sexual intimacy as you. Communicate what you want, and if she doesn't want the same, then respect her choice. If she doesn't want intercourse, it doesn't mean that she doesn't want you. If there is doubt about her full consent, you can and should stop. Be aware of the physical and strength difference between you two, and know that DNA testing will identify you as the rapist if you were to victimize the person. If you know a rape is happening or about to happen, stop it. I mentioned before that a woman that is raped should preserve the evidence, meaning not take a shower right away and instead go straight to the police and report the incident so that a rape kit can be conducted. So we're going to watch a video now on what exactly that is.
Just a warning, what I'm about to talk about is sensitive and may be potentially distressing for some viewers. Hello everyone, Julia here for D News. Crime shows give Americans a skewed view of the justice system. For the most heinous of crimes, evidence abound and the bad guy is always caught. Yet thousands of victims of sexual assault never get their TV ending. Right now, states across the country keep hundreds of thousands of untested rape kits in storage. Detroit is the most notorious city of late. 5 years ago, 11,000 untested kits were discovered in a warehouse. Since then, only a fraction of those have been tested. Authorities in Detroit are trying to raise $10 million to process and prosecute the rest of their backlog rape kits, so that's good. But what is a rape kit? A rape kit is a forensic tool to collect and preserve DNA and other physical evidence after a sexual assault. In different cities, it goes by different names. In Washington, D.C., they're called a Physical Evidence Recovery Kit, or PERK. In other cities, it's called a Sexual Assault Forensic Evidence, or SAFE kit. No matter what they're called, they contain the same basic tools. A kit can contain a blood sample from the victim, swabs to collect bodily fluids, a comb to collect hair and fiber from clothing, a nail pick to get any evidence under the nail, and storage boxes, bags, and slides to preserve these items. There's usually bigger bags to collect some clothing or material from the victim, and up to 15 envelopes to store the evidence. The collection is part of a hospital exam and should be done within 98 hours of the assault. The collection is done by a trained member of sexual assault response team in a private, secluded part of a hospital. An exam is performed after a victim gives written consent and a thorough medical history. Starting with less invasive collection, swabbing the mouth and getting underneath the fingernails, then collecting hair and fiber samples, moving on to more invasive collection, photographing any injuries, and swabbing the genitalia and anal area, which can be very emotionally trying for a victim. During the exam, a doctor can test for sexually transmitted infections as well as provide emergency contraception. The whole process can take a few hours. While difficult, collecting the evidence is worth it. Rape kits can confirm a victim's report, identify an unknown perpetrator, or identify a serial offender, and can even clear innocent suspects. For thousands of kits to go untested is more than just shameful. It's a huge disservice to victims of sexual assault everywhere. Small police budgets and a false belief that testing was only beneficial in cases where the rapist was a stranger kept kits on the shelf. But there is hope. Many cities across the nation are racing to get rape kits out of storage and processed. For example, in San Francisco, a kit must be sent to a crime lab within 72 hours of collection, and information uploaded to a national database within 2 weeks. And across the country, other states have enacted legislation to reform the process of their kits. For more information on the backlog of rape kits, and for more information on sexual assault, check out some of the links we have below in the description. So should states be doing more to process the backlog of rape kits? More legislation? Better technology? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to more D News for more science every day.
So we've discussed the fact that many sexual assault victims never come forward and report the assault. So with that in mind, I'd like for you to tell me what you think about a statute of limitations being put upon sexual assault victims. Do you think that this is a correct thing to do or an incorrect thing to do? So a statute of limitations is a law that says that you only have a certain time to report a crime. But some people say that this is not fair to sexual assault victims because it takes a long time to kind of heal those wounds and gain the courage to come forward, whereas other people say that it looks suspicious when someone doesn't report a crime for 20 years, and how do you then prove it, and evidence could have been lost and all of that. So I'd like for you to respond to that question in 2 to 3 sentences. Do you think it's right for there to be a statute of limitations on sexual assault victims, knowing what you know about reasons victims don't come forward? And so this will be for lecture activity number 2. Child sexual abuse is defined as the sexual victimization of a child by an adult or a significantly older child. It's usually about power and control, not as much about sex. It also is usually done by someone the victim knows, and that perpetrator will use punishment and threats more than physical violence. So some terms you need to know include pedophilia, which is uncontrollable sexual compulsions involving children, child molestation, which is any sexual act performed with a child by an adult or much older child, and incest, which is molestation of a child by a blood relative, such as a parent, aunt, uncle, grandparent, brother, or sister. So who are the abusers? Only 7% of cases happen with someone the victim does not know. Abusers are usually shy and victims of child sex abuse when they were younger. They're usually attracted to children of either gender and fear adult intimate relationships. They usually suffer from anxiety and depression, live alone or with their parents, and abuse drugs. They're often unemployed or work in low-paying jobs. They engage in other atypical sexual behaviors like exhibitionism or sadomasochism. Some are deeply moralistic or have deep religious beliefs, and they usually have more than one victim. There have been studies that show up to 100 or more victims for one perpetrator. So how common is sexual abuse? It's actually pretty difficult to know. Researchers believe that it is underreported. However, there are on average 60,000 new cases of child sexual abuse reported each year in the United States. Research shows that for most people, the effects of child sexual abuse last throughout their life. They often experience emotional distress, which is being haunted into adulthood with thoughts that it's their fault, they didn't report it so no one rescued them, or perhaps they in some way enjoyed it. They often see themselves as damaged goods, bad, immoral, or sexually perverted. Since they often see themselves as not worthy of love, many survivors are in abusive relationships as adults. The distress increases the longer they keep it a secret. In fact, one study found that the average victim waited 14 years after abuse ends to tell anyone. Common emotional problems in adulthood include anger, poor self-esteem, self-blame, shame, guilt, isolation, and loneliness. Victims of child sexual abuse are also more likely to have psychological disorders than people who are not victims. So childhood sexual abuse robs its victims of feeling a personal sense of power, feeling in control of their life and their body, and this can lead to depression. Some other common psychological problems victims may experience include self-destructive behavior, substance abuse, anxiety disorders, denial, dissociation, PTSD, and learning disabilities, as well as suicidal behavior. Victims may also have adult intimate relationship problems. So this is the most commonly reported after effect, and child sexual abuse survivors tend to have more relationship problems than the general population. Some of the problems they experience include re-victimization, emotional distance, less trust, inability to feel safe and secure, lack of enjoyment in sex, anxiety over sex, sexual problems, forcing sex on a partner, or increased promiscuity. Victims also suffer from medical consequences. Survivors often suffer physical injuries and don't tell anyone. Some long-term medical consequences as a result of the abuse may include alcoholism, obesity, tobacco use, STIs, gastrointestinal problems, chronic pain, insomnia, eating disorders, and asthma. Victims often avoid medical care. They won't go to the OBGYN, get mammograms, dental exams, prostate exams, because these all involve being restricted and or confined. And some child sexual abuse survivors overuse medical care due to somatization, which is a psychological problem that causes physical symptoms, a sort of manifestation of their emotional problems into their physical body. So let's watch a video now on the effects of child sexual abuse on the victims.
Well, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is when our children are abused, whether it's sexually, physically, emotionally, those scars stay with children, in essence, sometimes for a lifetime. And then it manifests itself in underperforming children in school. They potentially act out and may get involved with law enforcement and other problems. And then they lose hope in their life.
You know, I think back now, and again, she destroyed me, period, emotionally. She took the me out of me.
I think it's a struggle for children, and I think it goes on through most of their lives for many of them, especially if they don't get treatment.
Many children, go down a path, or adults go down a path of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, promiscuity, prostitution. It runs the gamut. You can act in or you can act out. And so there are real life-threatening consequences from being a victim of sexual assault.
I ended up rebelling. I would fight everybody. I was always angry. I was a very, very angry person. And that led me to go to juvenile.
One of the things I do struggle with all the time is weight. There was a time about 15 or so years ago that I actually lost a lot of weight and got down to close to what the weight charts say my weight should be. And it was terrifying because, once the weight was off, people started being more flirtatious towards me. I started seeing myself as more of a sexual being, and immediately the weight came back on. So, there are things that you constantly deal with.
The cost, not only to the victim, but the families, is so great. It's not just the victim who suffers. While they do suffer the greatest amount, there's other siblings, parents, who now have to go down a spiral of, did I do enough? Why wasn't I there?
When Anthony realized that this had such an effect on his life, it affected me in a way that I did a terrible job as a mother in that area. And that's something that it's just hard to accept. I'm sorry that I trusted her the way I did.
Let's talk now about reducing child sexual abuse. So the treatment for child sex abusers is usually jail time, and very few prisons offer any type of therapy or rehabilitation. One study found that 10 years after release from prison, 30% reoffend, and after 20 years, 50% have reoffended. Louisiana tried to pass a law where repeat child sex offenders would be executed, but the Supreme Court denied the passing of this law on a 5-4 vote. So success in treatment of sex abusers has been notoriously ineffective. Some of the treatment methods that have been tested or tried include chemical castration, which is blocking the production of testosterone in repeat sex offenders through regular injections of female hormones such as Depo-Provera. In 1997, California passed a law requiring surgical or chemical castration for repeat child molesters that are eligible for parole. Since then, many other states have issued or are trying to issue similar laws. Surgical castration involves the removal of the testicles, because the testicles make the hormone testosterone, which is associated with the sexual drive. Offenders have the option to be castrated at time of parole or to continue serving their sentence. And studies show that chemical castration has been somewhat effective when used in conjunction with counseling. Blocking testosterone helps control violent urges, and child molesters also report this helps them to control their urges. Another attempt at reducing child sexual abuse involves isolating child molesters from contact with children, so they can either be isolated by imprisonment or notification laws. And many molesters admit that when they are released from prison, that they probably will offend again. Child sex abuse offenders that don't use physical violence usually get a 5-year sentence or less. There is a law called Megan's Law that requires that communities be notified when a sex offender moves into the area. And this law is based off a case from the 1990s when a little girl at the age of 7 named Megan was raped and molested by a convicted child molester that had moved into her neighborhood without anyone's knowledge. Another law is called Jessica's Law, and it requires sex offenders to wear an ankle bracelet with a GPS on it, and they can't live near places that children congregate, and this law also introduced longer prison terms for child sex abuse offenders. So in 2005, 9-year-old Jessica Lunsford was kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered by a convicted sex offender. And so this is the origins of Jessica's Law. In California, sex offenders can't live within 2,000 feet of schools, parks, and other safe zones, and they also receive a 25-year sentence for felony sex offenses. However, this is somewhat controversial because the problem is that many offenders end up homeless, and this actually may increase their chance of reoffending. Another thing that we can do to reduce child sexual abuse is to teach children to protect themselves. Studies show that when children are educated on sex abuse, they are less likely to be victimized. Programs that discuss good touch versus bad touch and teach children that they have the right to say no to inappropriate touching have been found to be somewhat effective. These programs teaches them to tell if someone makes them uncomfortable, even if that person is a relative or threatens them. So children need to be taught to yell, scream, or run if they are in a dangerous situation. And it's suggested that parents start telling their kids this at the age of 3, but the information needs to be presented in a way that is age appropriate. There are books and online resources to help parents to know what to say. So due to laws like Jessica's Law and Megan's Law, it's difficult for sex offenders to find housing. And so there is one community in Florida that have created what is called a Sex Offender Village, which is a place that is kind of remote and follows these laws by keeping sex offenders away from places that children congregate, such as schools and parks. So let's watch a video clip now on this Sex Offender Village.
I am a convicted sex offender. I had sex with a 16-year-old female who was my girlfriend, who I was dating at the age of 18 and 19.
While I was in gay rehab, I had conversations with my counselor, and part of the conversation, I disclosed some information that I had touched a boy inappropriately.
I had consensual sex with an underage girl.
My charge is computer solicitation of a minor. Never had sex with him, never had contact with him. I was turned in by his parents.
My charges were lewd and lascivious behavior with a child under 16. Prior to that, I was one of the top racquetball coaches in the world.
I spent 2.5 years in prison.
I was in prison for 10 years.
I ended up doing 22 months.
I got a year in county jail.
After my release, I really didn't know where I could go.
There's laws in the state of Florida that say you can't live within 1,000 feet of where a child might congregate.
No, there's a school here. No, there's a park there. No, there's a bus stop down the street.
We had searched for places to live, and nobody would rent to us.
If it wasn't for this place, I would be homeless.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have about 200 people, close to 200 people. I think we have 107 offenders here right now. We got sugar cane, corn, and green beans all around us, as far as you can see. Our closest neighbor's about 2.5, 3 miles away. Right over here is our sewage treatment plant. We're a self-contained village. We have our own water supply, our own sewage treatment. We're funded mainly by donations. I don't think there's many places in the United States like this.
We label people, sex offenders or sexual predators, for a wide variety of behaviors. So as a result, we have a lot of folks carrying those labels without it really distinguishing between who's dangerous and who isn't.
Once you've got the label, you're on the internet the rest of your life.
Walking into a grocery store, you got photographs up on the wall that has your name.
People aren't going to hire you.
They find out that we're felons, the application's thrown away. It's not even a chance.
And especially if it's a sex crime.
Corporate McDonald's or Burger King, they don't want to have anything to do with you. I'm going to be on that registry till the day I die.
The sad part of it is that upsets me as a mother is the fact that this is on him for the rest of his life.
Qualifications basically fall under a case-by-case basis. We do a background, we try to talk to people, find out they're going to be a good fit in the community.
We get at least 100 requests a week to move in here from people that need housing.
But if you're talking about somebody who's 17 years old, none of our guys out here are going to have contact with him because he's a minor.
And he's from this county, right?
His family's from this county. His
Okay.
crime was in another county, but
Yeah.
his family lives in Boynton.
This is a situation where this kid has no place, absolutely no place to go.
I don't know how people survive. You know, we have Miracle Village, thank heavens, in terms of there being at least a place where people can live and feel human. But other than that, I don't know how people survive.
Sexual harassment is a pattern of unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal and physical conduct that is coercive or creates a hostile work or educational environment. So compared to the previous types of sexual aggression that we've discussed in this lecture, this may seem mild, but studies show that it can be extremely traumatic for some victims. There's two main categories of sexual harassment: quid pro quo and hostile environment. So quid pro quo is the idea of something being given in exchange for a benefit or a reward. So some type of sexual act being used in exchange for a grade in a college setting or in exchange for a raise or a promotion in a workplace setting. So a hostile environment is a distressing work or educational environment resulting from overt or covert sexually related activities or intrusions. And charges of sexual harassment rarely occur due to an inappropriate sexual joke, innocent flirting, or a single friendly touch. So there are many different sexual harassment settings. It's not always between a superior and subordinate power dynamic. It can also happen between peers. So one of the sexual harassment settings we're going to discuss are schools, K through 12, and studies do show that kids harass other kids. 80% of teen boys and girls report being sexually harassed on a daily basis by their peers, and 29% of sixth graders report being harassed in the last 90 days. So sexual harassment in schools includes sexual graffiti, sexual teasing, intimidation, rumor spreading, sexual verbal taunting, unwanted touching, assault, and even rape. And this affects victims psychologically, emotionally, and their physical health, as well as their academic performance. So laws require that schools protect students from being sexually harassed by peers, and that these schools can be held financially responsible for personal damage to the victims. Another sexual harassment setting we're going to discuss is college. 60% of students report being sexually harassed at their college. Most colleges have policies preventing professors from engaging in sexual relationships with students. However, this is controversial because some say as long as the adults are consenting, it's not a problem. But the problem is it really consensual when a professor has power over your grade, class enrollment, letters of recommendation, etc.? These things may cause the victim to feel pressure. So it's actually more common amongst peers in college. Common behaviors include waiting outside classrooms, continually asking for a date after refusals, comments about sex or the person's body, and unwanted touching. So there are several effects of sexual harassment on the victims that include depression, anxiety, poor academic or work performance, insomnia, poor self-esteem, substance abuse, and absenteeism from work or school. So let's watch a video on another sexual harassment setting, which is just the street. So sometimes this form of sexual harassment is called street harassment, and it involves what's commonly referred to as catcalling, or shouting out things about a person's body or appearance, or making a sexual commentary towards a person who's just walking down the street. So let's watch a video clip on that now.
Hi, baby. You should smile.
I want to suck them.
You wore that for me?
Some guy walked by me and whispered, I want to lick your.
Those are the kind of things that you hear.
The first time I got catcalled, I was in the 5th grade.
Maybe 13 or 12.
When I was 16, I went to a concert.
And that was, what, you're like 10 in 5th grade? I was wearing a modest dress, obviously, but I was wearing heels.
There was somebody just following me back and forth. So the bus driver stopped in the middle of a big street, and he opened up the door, and he decided to harass me.
He kept following me and saying things under his breath right behind me. I tried to walk in the revolving doors, and he stopped the revolving doors and grabbed my arm.
I rounded a corner and there was a group of about 8 men, and I walked by them, but one of them grabbed me on the shoulder. These are definitely situations that could quickly escalate into something more violent.
An older white man reached under my underwear and grabbed my just like Trump described himself doing. What was kind of weird was no one was really coming to help me out. And it took me physically screaming for the security guards came out and, handcuffed him and everything with the police. But
it scared me so bad, and my gut reaction was to be like, don't do that. And I went, don't touch me. But all the guys that were with him laughed.
I was so embarrassed, and the bus was filled with people, and they were just all looking at me.
Sometimes, if you didn't respond to a guy, they would throw something at you.
I told him to back the off, and he was like, ooh, you're feisty, you're a feisty one, you want this.
All of it hurts me, I think.
At this point, it's not a surprise, it's just kind of the standard.
You feel guilty walking away without saying anything because this was your responsibility to tell these men that they're sexually harassing you instead of it being their responsibility not to do it.
I just feel gross and ashamed, and then also guilty.
It contributed to my choice of clothing, to the routes that I was taking, to the train or from the train, everything.
No one's gonna believe me. Everyone's gonna blame me. I feel like my body is just doesn't belong to me.
Do you want a new boyfriend?
Hey baby, hey girl.
Smile.
Keep taking it off.
But those are just words.
Those are just words.
Those are just words.
But those are just words. But those are just words, right?
For lecture activity 3, I would like for you to tell me your opinion on men catcalling women on the streets. Do you consider this to be a form of sexual harassment? So if a female walks past a male and he says something to her about her appearance, or makes a comment about wanting to have some sort of sexual interaction with her or date her or anything along those lines, do you consider that to be sexual harassment, or is it just a male giving a compliment to a female and harmless? So respond to that in 2 to 3 sentences for lecture activity 3. Alright, that is it for chapter 13. So don't forget to submit your lecture activities and complete all the assignments associated with this chapter. And we will see you for the next lecture. Have a great day.